I found a video of my husband with his ex. The truth was more shocking than the affair. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I never thought I was the type of woman who would go through her husband's files. I believed in trust, in privacy, in respecting boundaries. But sometimes the universe forces your hand, and you discover that the life you thought you were living was never yours to begin with. My name is Claire, and I've been married to David for 4 years. We met at a mutual friends gallery opening 5 years ago, one of those chance encounters that feels destined. He was charming, successful, emotionally available in ways that felt refreshing after a string of disappointing relationships. He was a financial consultant. I was an architect. We fit together easily, naturally. David had been married before. He told me about it on our 3rd date, the way you're supposed to tell someone about past relationships when things start getting serious. Her name was Olivia. They'd been married for 6 years before divorcing about 18 months before we met. It just didn't work out, he'd said, swirling wine in his glass. We wanted different things. The divorce was amicable. We don't keep in touch. I didn't press for details. Everyone has a past, and David's openness about having been married before felt mature, honest. He didn't trash talk his ex or claim she was crazy, which I appreciated. He simply said they'd grown apart and moved on. Looking back now, I realize how carefully he'd controlled that narrative, how little he'd actually told me while making it seem like he'd been transparent. Our relationship moved quickly. We were engaged within a year, married 6 months after that. His parents loved me. My family adored him. We bought a beautiful townhouse in the city, talked about having children someday, built what I thought was a partnership based on mutual respect and love. There were small things, of course. Things I noticed but explained away because I loved him and wanted to believe the best. David was protective of his phone, always keeping it face down, using a complicated password. He had a separate office in our home that he kept locked when he wasn't using it, claiming he had sensitive client information. Old habits from living alone. He'd joke when I mentioned it. He traveled for work occasionally, usually 2 or 3 days at a time. He'd call every night, send pictures of boring hotel rooms and conference centers, complain about the food and how much he missed me. I had no reason to doubt him. There was one strange incident about a year into our marriage. I'd answered his phone when he was in the shower, just to tell whoever was calling that he'd call back. The number was unlisted. When I answered, there was a pause. Then a woman's voice said, "Tell him I called," and hung up. When I mentioned it to David, his face flickered with something I couldn't quite read before he smiled. Probably a client. They have my personal number sometimes. She didn't leave a name. Some of them are paranoid about privacy. It's fine, Claire. Don't worry about it. I didn't. I trusted him. That was my mistake. Everything changed 3 weeks ago. David was on one of his business trips, this time to Seattle for a consulting conference. I was working from home, finalizing designs for a new residential project, when my laptop crashed. Just completely died, taking with it 2 days of work I hadn't backed up yet. In a panic, I remembered that David had an old external hard drive in his office. He'd mentioned months ago that I could use it if I ever needed backup storage. I dug through the drawer where I thought he kept it, and sure enough, found a small black drive tucked under some old papers. I plugged it into my desktop and started copying my recovered files. The drive was mostly empty, just some old tax documents and spreadsheets. But there was one folder labeled Personal Archive that caught my eye. I should have closed it. Should have respected his privacy. But something made me click on it. Some instinct I didn't even know I had. Inside were photos. Lots of them. David and a woman I'd never seen before, but who I immediately knew was Olivia. She was beautiful in an effortless way, with long auburn hair and green eyes. They looked happy in the photos. Wedding pictures, vacation shots, mundane moments captured over years. I felt a strange twist in my chest. Not quite jealousy, but something close to it. These were artifacts of a life David had lived before me. Evidence of a relationship he barely mentioned. I knew I should close the folder, but I kept scrolling. That's when I found the videos. There were maybe a dozen of them, all with generic file names. 2018, so 315, 2018 07 22, dates like that. The most recent was labeled 2020 1108, November 2020. More than a year after David and I had started dating, 6 months before our wedding. My hands were shaking as I clicked on it. The video opened on what looked like a bedroom. Not the bedroom in our townhouse, but somewhere else, somewhere I didn't recognize. The quality was good, like it had been filmed on a decent camera rather than a phone. After a moment, David walked into frame. He looked like himself, wearing clothes I recognized from that time period. And then she appeared. Olivia. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. I should have closed it then. But I didn't. They sat on the edge of the bed together, and at first I thought this would be exactly what it looked like. Evidence that my husband had been cheating on me, that his divorce hadn't been as final as he'd claimed. But then they started talking. "We need to be more careful," Olivia said, her voice clear on the recording. "She's getting comfortable. That's when people start noticing things." David rubbed his face tiredly. "I know, but we can't rush it. If we move too fast, she'll suspect something." "It's been over a year, David. How much longer?" "As long as it takes. We planned this, Liv. We knew it wouldn't be quick." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. They weren't talking like ex-spouses who couldn't let go. They were talking like conspirators. "I'm just saying," Olivia continued, "every day we wait is another day this could fall apart. What if she finds something? What if someone tells her?" "No one knows except us," David said firmly. "And she trusts me completely. She's not going to go looking for problems that don't exist." Olivia laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. "She does trust you, doesn't she? God, sometimes I almost feel bad for her." "Don't," David said sharply. "Remember what we're doing this for. Remember what they took from us." They. Who was they? What had been taken? "I know," Olivia said, her voice softer now. "I know. It's just harder than I thought it would be, watching you play house with someone else." David pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "It won't be forever. Once we have what we need, once this is finished, we can stop pretending. We can finally be done with all of it." "And her?" Olivia asked. "What happens to Claire?" There was a pause. David's face on the screen looked troubled, conflicted. "We'll handle it when the time comes. But Liv, we can't think about that now. We have to stay focused." The video ended there. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the black screen. The timestamp showed the video had been recorded on November 8th, 2020. I checked my phone calendar, scrolling back through old entries. November 8th, 2020. The day David had proposed to me. He'd gotten down on one knee in that restaurant, tears in his eyes, and told me I was the love of his life. And that same day, he'd been with Olivia, discussing their plan, whatever it was. Discussing me like I was a mark, a target, a problem to be handled. I backed out of the video and started going through the other files with methodical precision, no longer feeling guilty about invading David's privacy. He'd invaded my entire life. I found more videos, spanning back to 2018, months before David and I had even met. In them, David and Olivia discussed their divorce, but not like people who were actually separating. They talked about it like a strategy, a necessary step in some larger plan. "The divorce needs to look real," David said in one video from February 2018. "We can't give anyone reason to think we're still together." "How long do we have to keep this up?" Olivia asked. "A year, maybe 2. Long enough for people to believe I've moved on. long enough to find the right person. The right person. They'd been planning this before I'd even entered the picture. I found documents, too, hidden in subfolders with innocuous names. Financial records showing joint accounts that David and Olivia still shared, despite supposedly being divorced. Property deeds for houses I'd never heard of, listed in both their names. Most disturbing were the dossiers. They had files on multiple women, including one on me. My full name, my background, my job, my family, my financial information, details about my past relationships. It was dated 6 months before I'd met David at that gallery opening. That gallery opening that now felt less like fate and more like a setup. The file on me had notes in what looked like David's handwriting. Good income, stable career, close to family but not dependent. No red flags, trusting personality, possible candidate. Candidate for what? I went through the other women's files. There were 4 others, all with similar notes, all evaluated like they were applying for a job rather than unknowingly being considered for marriage to my husband. 2 of the women were crossed out, with notes like, too suspicious or asked too many questions about finances. One had David's handwriting next to her photo. Almost worked, but family was too involved. Had to break it off. I was the only one still active, the only one who'd made it all the way to marriage. I kept digging, driven by a manic need to understand what was happening. I found email exchanges between David and Olivia, continuing long after their supposed divorce. They were careful, using vague language, but the intimacy was clear. They signed off with, "Love you and miss you." They made plans to meet at locations I didn't recognize. And then I found the file labeled Hamilton Evidence. Hamilton. That was David's mother's maiden name. I opened it. Inside were news articles from 2015, 7 years ago. They were about a financial scandal involving a wealth management firm in Boston. The firm had been running a Ponzi scheme, and when it collapsed, dozens of people lost their life savings. Several of the firm's executives went to prison. I didn't understand the relevance until I saw the victim list. David Hamilton and Olivia Hamilton. They'd lost everything in the scheme. Their savings, their investments, the inheritance David had received from his father. Over $2 million just gone. There were photos of them outside the courthouse, looking devastated. Articles that quoted them talking about how they'd trusted the wrong people, how their lives had been destroyed. The firm's name was Rothschild and Associates. I didn't recognize it. Then I saw my last name, Claire Rothschild. Before I'd married David and taken his name, my stomach dropped. I searched for more information, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type. It took me 10 minutes to find it. But there it was. My father's name, Jonathan Rothschild, listed as one of the senior partners at Rothschild and Associates. My father, the man who'd been in prison for the past 6 years for fraud and embezzlement. The man I'd cut out of my life completely, who I never talked about, whose existence I'd tried to pretend away. David had asked about my father exactly once, early in our relationship. I'd told him we were estranged, that he'd done things I couldn't forgive, and I didn't want to discuss it. David had accepted that immediately, never bringing it up again. But he'd known. He'd known all along. I searched through more files with growing horror, finding the full scope of their plan. David and Olivia had spent years tracking the families of Rothschild and Associates partners. They'd researched us all, looking for weaknesses, for ways to get close. Most of the partners were older, married, unreachable. But I was different. I was young, single, vulnerable in the wake of my father's crimes. I'd changed my name back to my mother's maiden name, trying to distance myself from the scandal. I'd built a new life, a new identity. And David had found me anyway. They'd orchestrated our meeting. That gallery opening wasn't chance. Olivia's brother was the gallery owner, though I hadn't known that at the time. David had positioned himself perfectly, making sure he'd be introduced to me by mutual friends, making it seem natural. Everything had been calculated. The way he'd pursued me, the pace of our relationship, even the timing of his proposal. It was all designed to get me to trust him, to marry him, to give him access to my life. But why? What did they want? I found the answer in another file. Trust fund release. My grandmother had left me money, a substantial amount, over $3 million, held in a trust that would be released to me on my 30th birthday. That birthday was 3 months away. The trust documents were in the file. David must have found them in our house, photographed them without my knowledge. I'd inherited the trust from my mother's side of the family, money that had nothing to do with my father's crimes. It was my safety net, my future. And David and Olivia had been planning to take it. There were drafted documents showing how they intended to do it. As my husband, David would have certain rights to the trust once it was released. They'd planned to create financial emergencies, convince me to invest in fake business opportunities, slowly drain the money into accounts they controlled. Once they had it, they'd divorce me. David had already drafted separation papers, dated for 6 months after my birthday. The grounds would be irreconcilable differences, and they'd structured everything to make sure I'd get almost nothing in the settlement. It was revenge. Revenge for what my father had done to them, for the money they'd lost, for the life that had been stolen from them. And I was just collateral damage, a means to an end, a way to recoup their losses. I'd married a man who'd never loved me, who'd built our entire relationship on a foundation of lies and manipulation, who'd looked me in the eye every day for 4 years and lied about everything. I sat in my office, surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not sadness, not yet. That would come later. Right now, I felt something else. Clarity. David thought I was naive, trusting, someone who would never suspect, never question, never fight back. That's what they'd counted on when they'd chosen me. They were wrong. I spent the next 3 days copying everything, every file, every video, every document. I created multiple backups, storing them in places David would never think to look. I consulted with a lawyer friend without telling her the full story, just asking hypothetical questions about fraud and conspiracy. Then I made a plan. David came home from Seattle on Thursday evening, tired and affectionate, kissing me hello and telling me he'd missed me. I smiled at him, asked about his trip, and made dinner like nothing was wrong. "Everything okay here?" he asked over pasta. "You seem quiet." "Just busy with work," I said. "The Riverside project is in final stages." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, you know that? You work so hard." The worst part was how genuine he seemed. How convincing. If I hadn't seen those videos, if I hadn't read those files, I would have believed him completely. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," I replied, and watched his face relax. Over the next few weeks, I played the role he expected. The trusting wife. The naive woman who didn't question anything. But behind that facade, I was working. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Rita who specialized in infidelity and fraud cases. I gave her copies of everything I'd found and asked her to dig deeper. Within a week, she'd located the apartment where David and Olivia actually lived together, the one they kept secret. She had photos of them coming and going, holding hands, kissing on the street like any normal couple. She also found that Olivia had been using a fake name for her work, collecting disability benefits she didn't qualify for. That was fraud, the kind that could land her in prison. I contacted a forensic accountant and had him go through the joint accounts David and Olivia shared. He found evidence of tax evasion, unreported income, and money laundering. More crimes, more leverage. And then I did something that surprised even me. I reached out to my father. I hadn't spoken to him in 6 years, not since his sentencing. I'd cut him out of my life completely, ashamed of what he'd done, angry at how he destroyed our family. But now I needed him. I drove to the prison where he was serving his sentence and sat across from him in the visiting room. He'd aged badly, his hair gray and thin, his face lined with regret. Claire, he said, his voice breaking. I never thought I'd see you again. I need information, I said, not letting myself soften. About David and Olivia Hamilton. His face went pale. How do you know those names? I'm married to David, or at least I thought I was. I told him everything. He listened with growing horror, then sighed heavily. They lost everything in the collapse, he said. I remember them specifically because they were so young, just starting out. They'd put their entire inheritance into our fund. When everything fell apart, they were destroyed. Did you know they blamed you personally? A lot of people did. I was the face of the company, even though I wasn't the one who'd created the scheme. I knew what was happening, and I should have stopped it, but I was a coward. I let it continue because I was making money too. They want revenge, I said. They've been planning this for years. My father closed his eyes. God, Claire, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. Everything I did, it just keeps destroying people. I need you to testify, I said. About what happened at the firm, about the victim list, about David and Olivia being among those who lost money. I need documented proof of their motive. He opened his eyes, looking at me with something like hope. Anything. I'll do anything to help you. It took me another month to build the full case. I documented everything, creating a timeline that showed the conspiracy, the fraud, the stalking, the identity theft, all of it. Rita, the PI, added her evidence. The forensic accountant provided his analysis. My father gave a sworn statement. And then I contacted the FBI. White-collar crime, conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, stalking. The list of charges was extensive. I gave them everything, and they opened an investigation immediately. I could have just divorced David and walked away. But that wouldn't have been enough. He'd stolen 4 years of my life, built our entire relationship on lies, planned to take everything from me and disappear. He'd made me doubt my own judgment, my ability to trust anyone. He and Olivia had calculated that I'd be too trusting, too kind, too forgiving to fight back. They miscalculated. The FBI moved quickly once they had the evidence. They arrested David at his office on a Wednesday morning, Olivia at her apartment an hour later. I wasn't there to see it, but Rita was, and she sent me photos. David being let out in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock. They called me from the police station. David did, using his one phone call to beg me to help him. Claire, please. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain everything. Can you explain the videos, the files, the fake divorce, the apartment you share with Olivia, the plan to steal my trust fund? Silence on the other end of the line. How did you? I found it all, David. Everything. I know what you did. I know why you married me. I know all of it. Claire, listen to me. We were desperate. What your father did, it destroyed us. We lost everything. Our whole lives were ruined because of him. So you decided to ruin mine? You're his daughter. You benefited from his crimes, from the money he stole from us. We were just taking back what was ours. I was 18 when my father's company collapsed. I didn't benefit from anything. I lost my family, my reputation, my sense of safety. I changed my name and started over, and you made me a victim all over again. Please, he said, and he was crying now. Please don't do this. We can work something out. No, I said simply. We can't. I hung up. The trial took 9 months. David and Olivia both tried to plead not guilty, claiming they'd never intended to actually steal from me, that they'd just been role-playing in those videos, that everything was a misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming. The fake divorce papers, the secret apartment, the dossiers on multiple women, the financial fraud, my father's testimony about their motive, Rita's surveillance showing them living together as a couple while David was married to me. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. David was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Olivia got 6. They'll both be out eventually, but they'll be felons, Their lives destroyed the way they'd tried to destroy mine. There's a certain symmetry to that. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks after the sentencing. I got everything. The house, the savings, full protection of my trust fund, which was released to me on schedule. David's lawyer tried to argue that he deserved some of the marital assets, but my lawyer shut that down quickly. You don't get to profit from fraud. I kept my married name, though. Not because I have any attachment to David, but because I'd already changed my name once to escape my father's legacy. I wasn't going to do it again. Claire Mitchell was who I'd become, and I wasn't going to let David take that from me, too. It's been a year now since the arrests. I sold the townhouse. Too many bad memories. I moved to a different neighborhood, started fresh in a loft with big windows and clean lines. I threw myself into my work, took on bigger projects, won several design awards. I'm in therapy twice a week, working through the trauma of realizing my marriage was a lie. It's hard. Some days I can't trust my own judgment about anything. Other days, I'm angry at myself for not seeing the signs, for being so blind. But I'm healing, slowly. I went to visit my father a few months ago. Not to forgive him exactly, but to understand. We talked for 2 hours about his crimes, about the ripple effects of his choices, about how he'd become someone capable of destroying so many lives. I told myself I was just doing my job, he said, that I wasn't personally responsible. But I was. Every day I stayed silent. Every day I took my salary knowing where it came from, I was responsible. David and Olivia told themselves something similar, I said. That they were just taking back what was stolen, that I was complicit because of who my father was. They convinced themselves their revenge was justice. Was it? He asked quietly. No. Justice would have been prosecuting you and your partners, which they did. Revenge was building their lives around destroying mine. That was just cruelty dressed up as righteousness. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry, Claire, for all of it, for setting this whole chain of events in motion. I know, I said, but your apology doesn't fix what they did to me. It doesn't give me back those 4 years. No, he agreed. It doesn't. I haven't been back to see him since. Maybe someday I will. Or maybe that was the closure I needed. That one conversation where we both acknowledged the truth without trying to fix it. I'm dating again, carefully. It's hard to trust anyone. Hard to believe that someone could want me for me and not for some hidden agenda. I vet everyone extensively now, probably more than is healthy. My therapist says I'm protecting myself, which is natural, but that eventually I'll need to learn to be vulnerable again. I'm not there yet. Maybe I never will be. Sometimes I think about David and Olivia, sitting in their prison cells, regretting their choices. I wonder if they blame me for their downfall, if they've convinced themselves they were the real victims. Or maybe they've finally accepted responsibility for what they did. Maybe they understand that revenge doesn't heal anything. It just creates more victims. I doubt it, though. People who can construct a years-long conspiracy to defraud someone, who can look their victim in the eye every day and lie, who can plan to destroy someone's life as payback for someone else's crimes, those people don't suddenly develop empathy. The most painful part isn't even the betrayal, though that's bad enough. It's the realization that everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a fabrication. Every anniversary, every I love you, every intimate moment. None of it was real. David was performing, playing a role, and I was too naive to see it. That's what I'm still working through in therapy. The shame of being fooled so completely. The anger at myself for not questioning more, for not being more suspicious. But my therapist reminds me that trust isn't naivety. That wanting to believe the best of people isn't weakness. That David and Olivia were the ones who did wrong, not me. I'm trying to believe her. I found out recently that I'm not the only victim in this situation. The FBI investigation uncovered 2 other women David had been involved with before me, both of whom he'd targeted because of their connections to people he and Olivia blamed for their financial loss. He hadn't married either of them, but he'd defrauded them both out of significant amounts of money before disappearing. We formed a strange support group, the 3 of us. We meet monthly, share our experiences, help each other heal. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in this, that other people understand what it's like to have your reality completely shattered. One of the women, Marissa, said something that stuck with me. They targeted our capacity for love. They found people who could trust deeply, who could commit fully, and they weaponized that against us. But that capacity, that ability to love and trust, that's not a weakness. That's what makes us human. She's right. I refuse to let David and Olivia turn me into someone cynical and closed off. They don't get to destroy my ability to connect with people, to build genuine relationships, to trust again someday. That would be letting them win. So I'm rebuilding. My career is thriving. I have good friends, a supportive family, a life that's entirely my own. I'm not defined by what they did to me. I'm defined by how I responded. With strength, with intelligence, with determination to seek justice, not just for myself, but for everyone they'd hurt. I found a video of my husband with his ex. I thought the truth would be about an affair, about infidelity and betrayal in the traditional sense. The truth was so much darker. It was about a conspiracy years in the making, about two people who'd turned their pain into a weapon and wielded it against innocent people. It was about discovering that my entire marriage was an elaborate con, that the man I loved had never existed at all. But it was also about discovering my own strength, about learning that I could face horrifying truth and survive it, about understanding that being a victim doesn't mean being powerless. David thought he was so clever, that he'd planned for every contingency. But he never planned for the possibility that I might be smarter than him, that I might find his evidence and use it against him, that I might be capable of the kind of methodical, careful revenge he'd inflicted on me. He underestimated me completely, and that was his biggest mistake. I'm 31 now. My trust fund is secure, invested wisely, funding my life and my future. David is in year 2 of an 8-year sentence. Olivia is in year 2 of 6. They'll get out eventually, but I'll be long gone from their reach, living a life they can never touch again. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that video I found. The one where David and Olivia discussed me like I was just a mark, just a means to an end. I think about how close they came to succeeding, how easily I might have never found out until it was too late. But I did find out. And I fought back. And I won. That's what I hold on to on the hard days. Not the betrayal, not the lies, not the 4 years I lost. But the fact that when it mattered most, I was strong enough to save myself. And that's something David and Olivia can never take away from me.